A few years ago, when my parents were away for the weekend, I decided to invite a friend over for a sleepover. Technically, I wasn't allowed to have friends over when they were gone, but looking back, it was probably for the best that I did. We spent the whole night playing board games, card games, chatting about all sorts of things, and just messing around on our phones. I had just turned 16 at that time, and my friend, let's call her Emma, was 17. We weren't dating or anything. She was just a really good friend, like a sister I never had. My family's house was quite large and comfortable, thanks to my mom's job as a doctor and my dad's successful pressure washing business. Being an only child, I guess you could say I was quite pampered. I always wished for a sibling, but after me, my parents couldn't have any more children. They considered adoption, but never went through with it. Emma arrived around 9 p.m. that night. My parents had left much earlier, so we had the place to ourselves. We spent most of our time in my room, which was upstairs. Right outside my bedroom, if you look straight ahead, you could see the staircase running parallel to the hall, and my bathroom was right across from it. One wall of the hallway was just windows, overlooking the entire backside of the house. I remember being a little kid, always feeling uneasy walking past those windows at night. The vast backyard, complete with a pond, a playground, and a large barn, stretched out behind the house, backed by acres of dense woods. If someone wanted to, they could easily hide out there and watch us without us ever knowing. Sure, we had security cameras, but they had their blind spots, and at night they only captured blurry shapes and vague movements, nothing clear from a distance. I decided to take a shower, leaving Emma downstairs in the living room. As the water ran, I couldn't shake off a chilly feeling, as if eyes were watching from the shadows beyond the glass of the hallway windows. Just minutes into my shower, Emma burst up the stairs, her voice sharp with fear. "Lucas, come quick! There's someone in the backyard! Hurry, I'm really scared!" I scrambled out of the shower, hastily pulling on my clothes without bothering to dry off, my skin still dripping. I shoved my feet into my shoes and rushed to my parents' room to grab the rifle from their safe. With my heart pounding, I made sure every blind was closed and every door and window locked. We retreated to my bedroom, rifle in hand. Emma dialed the police while I called my mom. The officers were already on their way, and even though my parents were hours away, they started back immediately. I stayed on the line with my mom, describing every terrifying detail. Then a loud crash shattered the silence, the sound of breaking glass. Emma screamed and hid in my closet. It was up to me now. I was the one with the gun. Despite the terror that gripped me, I knew I had to protect us both. I stepped into the hallway and shouted down the stairs, "Hey, get out! The police are coming, and I have a gun! If I see you, I will shoot!" The sounds of someone rummaging through the house echoed back to me, loud bangs from the kitchen below, and the clattering of someone searching room by room. The intruder tried to break into my parents' safe, but thankfully couldn't open it. Had he been armed, the night might have ended in gunfire. He managed to grab some valuable jewelry and a few other small items. As he attempted to flee, the police arrived, catching him just as he was running out the door. I watched from the window as the officers tackled and tased him, handcuffing him on the spot. They later told us he had been wanted for a separate break-in and an armed robbery. After that night, my parents never allowed me to stay home alone again, and truthfully, I never wanted to be alone in that house ever again. One evening, as I was heading home from university, I crossed the street and noticed a car stopped at the red light. The driver rolled down his window and called out, asking if I wanted to join them for a party. I didn't respond and kept walking. After 2 more blocks, the same car sped up, made a U-turn, and then stopped right in front of me on the sidewalk. The driver and another man from the passenger seat stepped out. They asked my name and repeated their invitation to the party. They seemed to be in high spirits, celebrating a friend's birthday, who was visibly drunk in the back seat. They insisted repeatedly, urging me to come along. Despite my refusals, they persisted. I wanted to avoid a confrontation, knowing how unpredictable drunk people can be. Eventually, I seized the opportunity to escape when another vehicle came up behind theirs, honking impatiently. The road was narrow and one-way, blocked by their car, leaving no room for others to pass. I quickly turned into a nearby dimly lit alley, hoping to shake them off while they dealt with the traffic. My place was not far from there, just down the street. I really did not want those men to see where I lived. I thought I had finally lost them and was close to my temporary home. Just as I began to climb the steps, I heard the loud sound of a car honking and the engine revving as it raced toward me. It was those same men from earlier. "Hey, where are you going?" shouted the driver. "The party's this way." I hurried through my door, slammed it shut, and locked it quickly. Luckily, and quite ironically, a police officer was parked across the street and had seen everything. He immediately stopped the driver and began to question him. The driver was arrested for driving while drunk, but the other two were allowed to leave. I explained everything to the officer and thanked him for his help. I just hope they don't come back, and I especially hope they don't remember where I live. I don't live alone, which is comforting because being with others feels safer. However, this doesn't fully calm my nerves, and I still find myself anxious and sleepless thinking about what happened. Growing up, I was always on the quiet side. Even now, most people see me as quite withdrawn. I've never really understood why I'm like this. Sometimes I feel lonely, but I still choose solitude over company. During my college years, I was the kind who stayed in the background. I had a couple of friends, but we weren't very close. One afternoon, while on a lunch break, I grabbed my meal and sat at an empty table to eat. I felt more uneasy than usual. Normally, I didn't mind eating alone, but today felt different. I had been at the table alone for about 5 minutes, and it felt awkward. My usual social anxiety began to spike, and I hurried to finish my meal so I could return to my room. That's when I got this chilling feeling of being watched. I turned around and saw a guy staring right at me. Confused, I quickly looked away and focused on finishing my lunch. After tossing my trash, I glanced around the cafeteria. That same guy, now with a friend, was looking at me again, both wearing harsh, angry expressions. "What the heck?" I muttered under my breath. I didn't recognize either of them and couldn't figure out why they were giving me such fierce looks. Maybe they had a problem with me, or perhaps they were just making fun of me. Having been bullied before, I might have been overly sensitive, but their stares unnerved me. I left the cafeteria with a mix of confusion and worry, trying to shake off the feeling, and headed back to my dorm. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned for hours, overwhelmed by restlessness and anxiety. Eventually, I decided to get up and get some air. I wandered to a secluded part of the campus and found a bench I'd never noticed before, tucked under some trees near the entrance to a shadowy trail. After sitting alone for a while, I noticed a figure in the distance near a campus building, standing under a dimly lit yellowish light. The darkness around made everything seem more sinister. They just stood there, staring at me without moving for what felt like a long time. Suddenly, they began to run towards me. Frozen in shock, I barely managed to shout, what do you want?" As the figure got closer, I recognized him. It was the same man from the cafeteria earlier. Panicking, I stumbled backwards, calling out, "Hey, calm down, what's going on?" He reached me in seconds, grabbed my shirt, and punched me in the face repeatedly, breaking my nose. He snatched my phone and wallet without uttering a single word, then ran off. I never saw him again after that. Shaken, I gathered myself and made my way back to my dorm. I told my roommate everything, suggesting we should call campus security. Reluctant, I wanted to wait until morning. I described the attacker as best I could, but my roommate didn't recognize him. The next day, I spoke with the dean, who promised to check the security cameras and get back to me. His call later that day shocked me. He claimed the footage showed me alone all night. He even accused me of lying, threatening me with suspension. He replayed the video for me, insisting no one else was there. We argued, but he dismissed me, suggesting I was making it all up. Distressed, I returned to my dorm and updated my roommate about the confrontation with the dean. By now, he seemed to doubt my sanity, and I felt everyone else did too. Despite my visible injuries, a black eye and broken nose, no one believed me. It felt as though they all thought I had hurt myself. Friends distanced themselves, seeing me as attention-seeking or unhinged. From that day, nothing was the same. I was left bewildered, haunted by the incident. unsure of what really happened and haunted by the reality that no one knew or believed who attacked me. Halloween has always been my favorite day, even more so than Christmas. There's something special about the spooky atmosphere and the fun of dressing up that I really enjoy. This Halloween, however, turned out to be not just the worst Halloween ever, but also the worst day of my life. 5 years ago on this very day, I fell ill and couldn't join my friends for the Halloween festivities. It was a real disappointment, but there was nothing I could do. I was too sick. At that time, I was 19 and living alone in a house I had rented for the past 6 months. That evening, I tried to relax by watching some horror movies and munching on snacks, but I felt so unwell that I soon fell asleep. I'm not sure how long I was asleep when suddenly I was jolted awake by loud banging noises inside my house and the sound of things being thrown around in my kitchen. I was terrified and frozen in place, unsure of what was happening. I waited for about 30 seconds, hoping the noise would stop. I wanted to call the police, but I remembered that my phone was in the living room and I was too scared to go fetch it. So I quickly locked my bedroom door and pushed my dresser against it to block anyone from breaking in. I waited, heart pounding, for what seemed like an eternity but was probably only about 10 minutes. I was waiting for a long stretch of silence, hoping that would mean the intruder had left. Eventually, I mustered up enough courage to peek out of my room to see the state of my house and to look for my phone. The house was a mess, and my front door was wide open. My phone wasn't where I had left it. After locking the door and checking all the windows, I searched for my phone and found it under a cereal box on the kitchen counter. There was a sticky note on it with the words, "Don't be scared," written on it. Seeing that note made me feel sick. When I removed the sticky note, I saw that my phone's screen was completely shattered. It wouldn't turn on at all. My first thought was that my crazy ex-boyfriend might be involved, although I wasn't certain. Thankfully, I had installed cameras around the house, which I could access through an app on my laptop. I quickly turned on my laptop to check the cameras. To my horror, I saw a strange man at the end of my driveway staring straight at my house, wearing a very creepy costume and mask. I was so scared that I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife for protection, just in case. I went back to my room, picked up a hammer, and found my pepper spray in the closet. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Locking myself in my room again with the dresser still barricading the door, I felt a bit safer knowing he was outside. At least that's what I thought. Then I remembered I had an old iPod that I could use with Wi-Fi to send texts using a free app called Text Now. It took me another anxious 5 minutes to find the iPod in my cluttered room. Of course, the battery was dead. The old iPod was so outdated I was panicked, wondering if it would even work after all this time. I found its charger, plugged it in, and to my relief, it started charging. But it took over 20 minutes to turn on. While waiting, I was lying under my sheets, the room dark, heart pounding with fear, praying that everything would be okay. When it finally turned on, I quickly sent a message to my mom. "This is Olivia. Emergency. Call the police now. Send them to my house. I am in danger. Somebody broke into my house." I wasn't sure how long it took for my mom to see the message because the police didn't show up for about 30 minutes. I lay there crying, constantly checking the live camera app. The strange man was gone from the camera's view. This was a bit of relief, but not enough to make me feel safe to leave my room or to sleep. While lying there, I heard heavy, muffled breathing nearby. Alarmed, I jumped up, moved the dresser, and checked my house again, but found no one. Then it struck me. The one place I hadn't checked was under my bed. My instinct screamed at me to just leave the house immediately, but another part of me needed to know. I hesitated, then slowly peeked under the bed. There he was. As I lifted the bed skirt, he swatted at me with his hand, trying to grab me. I sprinted out before he could crawl out from under the bed. I ran out screaming to my neighbor's house and called my mom. She was relieved to hear from me, but mentioned she had already called the police. I explained everything to her and waited for the police at my neighbor's house. When the officers arrived, they said they found no one, and assured me they had searched everywhere in the house. Their words didn't comfort me. Knowing they hadn't caught the man made me refuse to spend another night alone in that house. I decided to move out as soon as possible. Since that night, I've been staying at my mom's house, and I will continue to do so until I find a new place where I feel safe. I keep thinking about the live camera app. Maybe there was a delay or it glitched, or perhaps there was more than one person involved that night. I've been a fan of camping all my life. It started when I was a kid, going out with my parents and siblings. As a teenager, I would go with my boyfriend Mike. We're still together as adults, and until this last summer, we never really had anything truly frightening happen while camping. This past summer, Mike and I decided to head to Redstone Canyon for some quality time alone. It had always been group trips before, but this time it was just the two of us. As soon as we parked our car to get our camping gear ready for the short hike to our spot, two unsettling guys emerged from the beginning of the trail. They gave us a long, hard look before walking over to their rusty VW camper van, parked not too far from ours. I felt uneasy, but decided to ignore it and focus on setting up camp. I knew the area well, having camped there several times before. I checked out a few potential spots and chose one a bit hidden from view, hoping we'd go unnoticed by others. While setting up, I could hear shouting from somewhere up the trail. The sun was setting and it was getting dark, so I went to gather some firewood. Out of nowhere, a man approached us, offering to sell us firewood for $10. I found it funny. Why buy wood when we were surrounded by it? He explained that there wasn't much around because they'd been collecting it for weeks. That struck me as odd. Curious, I asked him how long he'd been camping here. "Almost a month," he replied, though staying more than 2 weeks was against the rules in a national forest. His story didn't sit right with me. When I mentioned the shouting I had heard earlier, he became flustered and claimed it wasn't him. Well, yeah, there are some guys I know across the river, but they're not with me," he stammered. Then he added that he had been feeling lonely since his arrival from Pennsylvania, where he had taken a bus from to Lexington and had been living off the grid behind where I work. His story was full of holes, and his presence so far from any typical paths made me uneasy. As he stood there under the dimming light, I couldn't help but wonder what he was really doing out here and why he seemed so nervous about the mention of other people. It was odd, really. I knew the place he was talking about because I often saw homeless people moving in and out of those woods. So it seemed he was just another homeless man who hitched a ride to the canyon to live away from the usual spots. He had been surviving on snakes, bugs, and whatever he could gather, selling firewood to buy food or beer. He claimed we were the first people he'd seen in weeks, but his story was inconsistent, and I felt he was hiding something. He definitely wasn't alone, even though he insisted he was. He took us to his campsite, which was set up for several people, not just one. He said he preferred camping on the higher ground, where he could watch everything and everyone below. Later, he followed us to our campsite, which was directly in his line of sight from his higher position. Darkness had fallen by then, and he helped us start our fire. I was trying to hint that he should head back to his own site, hoping to give him a moment to leave without making a scene. After he left, I whispered urgently to Mike that there was no way I could sleep, knowing that deceptive man was lurking nearby. We were unarmed, without even a dog for protection. I suggested we pack up quietly and leave immediately. We left our tarps behind because they would make too much noise if we tried to take them down, which could alert him that we were escaping. Just as we were about to leave, with our backpacks ready, he shouted from his camp, "How's it going down there?" That was our cue. We ran silently but swiftly, driven by the fear of what he might do. His inconsistent stories and vague background suggested he might be running from something himself, choosing to hide by living off the grid. The next morning, I reported him to the rangers, explaining everything. Fortunately, all he ended up with was our tarps. I shudder to think what might have happened if we had stayed that night. A few years back, me and two of my friends were excited about moving into a house close to our university. We had everything planned out, but suddenly, one of our buddies decided he couldn't join us. This happened just 2 weeks before our classes were set to begin, so we urgently needed someone else to move in with us. Money was tight for all of us. There was absolutely no way we could manage to pay the extra share of the rent ourselves. We were pretty desperate to find a fourth roommate quickly. I put up a post on Craigslist explaining that we were 3 students, a 22-year-old guy, another 23-year-old guy, and a 21-year-old girl. I mentioned that the guys would be staying in rooms downstairs, and the new person, whether a guy or a girl, would be upstairs. The most important thing was that they needed to be able to pay their share of the rent. The very same day, I received a reply from a girl. Her English was a bit shaky, but good enough to understand. She introduced herself as an exchange student from Spain and mentioned she was currently staying at a hotel near the airport. She didn't share much about herself, but she did mention liking the TV show How I Met Your Mother, something I had talked about in my ad. Thinking it might be a good sign, I invited her over to see the place. The following day, the Spanish student came to check out the house. She was incredibly attractive and didn't come alone. A man accompanied her, which was unexpected. At first, I thought the man with her might be her friend or boyfriend. She was strikingly beautiful, easily a perfect 10, so I briefly wondered if this could be some kind of trick. However, she seemed genuinely interested in the house and was quick to decide she wanted to move in, likely because staying at a hotel was draining her finances quickly. She moved in 2 weeks later and everything seemed fine, but one day I brought up the man who had accompanied her on her first visit, as I hadn't seen him around since. She explained that they had met on the plane coming to the university. With nowhere to stay upon landing, they ended up sharing a hotel room, strictly in separate beds, while they each looked for a more permanent place to live. She recounted a night when he tried to sneak into her bed, which was disturbing enough to hear. His overall behavior had been quite unsettling, always lurking nearby as if watching her every move. It became clear why she was so eager to find her own space, away from him. As it turned out, she was an excellent roommate overall. My only minor gripe was her frequent use of oil in cooking, which left our kitchen surfaces greasy. She stayed with us for the entire semester until her family contacted her, needing her back in Spain to assist with their expanding family business. The truly eerie part of this story isn't about her or me. It's about the man who came with her. It appeared he didn't really know her well, but followed her from the airport, perhaps thinking he'd found an easy situation. In a way, by offering her a room, we might have inadvertently saved her from a potentially dangerous individual. Laura and her friend Jane had a tradition of setting off on a road trip every Halloween in search of spooky places to explore. They usually spent a few days driving to reach these destinations, often journeying through some lonely and deserted areas. On this particular trip, as they were leaving the coastal parts of California, night began to fall. They stumbled upon a small, old-looking motel that seemed cozy and inviting. Deciding it was a good place to rest, they checked in. The motel had a warm, welcoming air, and after a long day of driving, Laura and Jane were ready to crash. They quickly prepared for bed and fell into a deep sleep due to exhaustion. But in the dead of the night, Laura was jolted awake by the sound of the door seeming to unlock. At first, she thought Jane might have stepped out to the car, or was perhaps headed to the bathroom. Laura tried to dismiss the noise and go back to sleep. However, the sounds grew more urgent and desperate. The motel rooms had those old chain locks that allowed the door to be opened just slightly. Peering through the dim light, Laura saw the door ajar, with a man's arm sneaking through, fumbling with the chain lock. Panic surged through her as she realized the danger. She threw off her blankets and dashed to the door. Adrenaline fueled her movements as she reached to slam the door shut before the stranger could fully disengage the lock. Laura was terrified, thinking she might be hurt or worse in that moment. She rushed to the door and pressed her body against it, pushing hard while her hands scrambled to fasten the lock and the bolts. Both she and Jane were scared and didn't hesitate to call the police, though they knew help might take time to arrive. They decided to stay put in their room, too frightened to even think about stepping outside. They were unsure of what the man intended to do if he had managed to get inside. The wait for the police felt like an eternity. During this time, they couldn't shake off the fear and kept discussing what could have happened. Once they had informed the police, they ventured to the motel's front desk to see if the staff could provide any additional security or information. The man they saw at the desk was acting strangely, holding his arm in a peculiar way. He didn't attempt to flee, which was even more unsettling. When the police finally arrived, they found the man still there. However, proving anything was difficult. Laura explained later that the motel lacked CCTV cameras and there were no other witnesses. Laura wasn't even completely sure if the man at the front desk was the intruder, as her vision had been blurry from fatigue and the events had unfolded so quickly. Despite the uncertainty, Laura and Jane were certain they could not spend another minute in that motel. With the police present, they felt just safe enough to pack their belongings and leave. They resumed their journey, though now with heavy hearts and no longer excited about visiting haunted places. The break-in had drained their spirit for adventure, especially since they had barely slept before the incident. Out of all their trips and all the eerie places they had visited, this terrifying encounter at the motel was by far the most horrifying experience for them. It was a stark reminder that sometimes real people could be far scarier than any ghost in an abandoned house. I was staying at a motel in New Orleans with a couple of buddies. This motel, much like others in the area, had a small gaming room downstairs, a far cry from the vast casinos of Las Vegas, but enough to give us a taste of gambling and nightlife. We were there, obviously, to have a bit of fun at the tables, but also hoped to meet some women. I was 23 then, and my friends Tom and Mike were a bit younger. We were all ready to enjoy ourselves away from our usual routines of work and not having classes for a few weeks. It was probably around 9 p.m. one night when we decided to leave our separate rooms and head down to the gaming room. Dressed in our best suits, we felt sharp and ready for the evening. We didn't carry much money, just a few $100s each. But the main idea for the night, at least for me, was to charm some ladies. Back then, I fancied myself quite the charmer, though what happened later that evening would really change my perspective. As we entered the gaming room, we first grabbed some drinks and started planning which tables to try our luck at and for how long. In places like this, it's easy to lose track of both time and money. Perhaps it's the subtle background music or the scent they spray, but it can be quite mesmerizing. After finishing our drinks, we approached a slot machine to start off easy. We each inserted $10. I watched the reel spin and come to a stop, showing nothing worthwhile. Tom managed to win $5 but lost it on the next turn, a typical outcome. That's when I noticed a group of women across the room. They were giving me looks, pointing and smiling in my direction. It seemed too perfect, like something straight out of a movie where the protagonist can do no wrong. I hadn't even approached them or said a word, and here they were, showing interest. I felt like a celebrity, maybe someone they mistook for a famous actor. Excited, I pointed them out to my friends before deciding to walk over. Crossing the room, I reached the bar where one woman leaned casually against the counter and the others sat nearby on stools. I didn't catch what drinks they held, but they were all quite tall, around 5'10", and stunning, like models straight out of a magazine, possibly Russian. I walked up, introduced myself, and said hello. I stand at 5'8", not particularly tall, but I've never had trouble getting attention from women, thanks to being in good shape and reasonably handsome. But this felt surreal. 3 gorgeous women, seemingly interested without any effort on my part. As I stood there, my usual cautious self took a back seat. If only I had kept my wits about me, I might have anticipated the eerie turn the night was about to take. As I chatted with these women, they were all over me, hinting heavily that they wanted to come up to my hotel room. I believed I had struck gold, not in the casino games, but in what felt like hitting a jackpot worth millions. Introducing myself and talking more with them, everything seemed to be going perfectly. The chemistry was palpable. Excited, I decided to take them up to my room, a spacious room I had all to myself, with a large bed that seemed more than adequate for the four of us. Walking to my room, I was buzzing with excitement, marveling at my luck. It felt almost divine, as if some higher power had decided to favor me that evening. We reached my floor, stepped out of the elevator, and walked towards my room. I swiped the key card and opened the door, completely unaware of the nightmare about to unfold. The moment the door swung open, the three women pushed past me, slamming the door shut behind them. In my confusion, I still thought, wow, they're really enthusiastic. But their eagerness was not for me. It was for my valuables. One of them pulled out a knife while the others grabbed the phone I was reaching for to call the hotel reception. The woman with the knife cut the phone cord, severing my only easy contact with help, and then pressed the blade against my back, demanding I open my safe and hand over everything, including my passport. My heart sank as I realized I had been utterly fooled by a trio of professional criminals, reminiscent of villainous characters in spy movies. These women were intimidating, ready to harm me for a few valuables. Overpowered and outmatched, especially with them towering over me in their heels, I complied. I opened the safe, and as I recited the code, they swiftly grabbed my passport and the stash of cash I had saved. After securing what they came for, the woman stashed her knife back into her bag, and they all hurried out. Stunned and alone, I was left to figure out what to do next. My room phone was useless now, so I hesitantly used my mobile phone to call my friends, who were nearby. They arrived, half joking and unaware of the seriousness of the situation, having just lost money at the slots themselves. They initially thought I was pulling a prank, but the severed phone line convinced them otherwise. We used their room's phone to alert hotel security, triggering an immediate investigation. I recounted everything to security, who then reviewed CCTV footage from the hallway and the elevator in an attempt to identify the culprits. Ironically, these seasoned thieves had not fled, but had returned to the bar downstairs to splurge my money. Security acted swiftly, involving the police, who detained the trio at the casino. There was no video evidence of the robbery inside my room, and the women denied all accusations. Nevertheless, the police took them into custody after security retrieved my belongings. The incident resulted in a ban from the hotel for the women and a likely criminal record after the investigation concluded. Looking back, I marvel at how naive I was, deceived by mere flirtation and the allure of a too-good-to-be-true encounter. It was a harsh lesson in the dangers lurking behind charming smiles. In my late 20s and early 30s, my job gave me many opportunities to travel. Most times, I only stayed a couple of days in each place for work, so there wasn't much chance to explore the nice spots I visited. However, once in Pennsylvania, I finished a work project a day early and had an extra day before my flight back home. I rarely had free time during these trips, so I decided to make the most of this unexpected day. I chose to hike a long trail that wound through beautiful forests and trees in the area. Being stuck indoors for work most of the time made me crave nature even more, and this was the perfect chance to enjoy the outdoors. I had to wake up early and stop by a store to pick up some hiking gear since I hadn't packed any. The trail was about an hour's drive from my hotel, and I got there just before noon. The trail was empty, which pleased me. I had read online that the round trip would take about 6 hours, so I was in for a full day's adventure. With a small backpack containing a water bottle and snacks, I started my hike. The first hour was incredibly peaceful, a solitary walk among the trees that provided a pleasant break from my busy work life. However, as I walked, I noticed a man sitting beside the trail ahead. He seemed to be asleep, his head down and a hoodie covering his face. As I got closer, he suddenly looked up, giving me a long, intense stare as I passed by. It was unsettling, but I kept going, occasionally glancing back to see if he was following me. After a few more hours, Feeling tired and hungry, I stopped to rest on a log by the trail and eat a snack. Barely 5 minutes had passed when I saw the same man from earlier walking toward me. He was still far off, so I quickly packed up and continued walking, hoping to avoid any interaction. But soon, I heard fast footsteps approaching from behind. I turned to see the man jogging towards me. I stepped aside, hoping he would just run past, but instead, he stopped right in front of me. I was very uneasy. He didn't speak, but reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet, offering it to me, claiming, "I think you dropped this." It clearly wasn't mine, and I could see it was empty. I told him he was mistaken, that I hadn't brought my wallet. He insisted it was mine and that I needed to take it. His eyes hardened as he spoke, and I felt threatened. It seemed like he was trying to pull some trick, maybe to rob me. Not knowing what else to do, I reluctantly took the wallet from him. He gave me a chilling smile and said, "You're welcome," before walking away. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I examined the wallet. It was an old, worn brown one that folded open. The whole situation felt wrong, and a sense of dread settled over me as I wondered what his intentions were and what might happen next on this isolated trail. I opened the wallet fully, searching each compartment, but it was completely empty. The situation was baffling. Determined to avoid another encounter with that man, I quickly turned around and started heading back to my car. By now, it was 4 p.m., and it would take me over 2 hours to get back. I tried to enjoy the return walk, but the strange encounter kept replaying in my mind, making me increasingly uneasy. I kept looking around, half expecting to see him following me, but thankfully, there was no sign of him. Eventually, I could see my car parked ahead. The sun was setting, stretching long shadows across the ground, and my car was positioned so that I approached it from the front. As I got closer, I spotted a man's shadow beside my car, as if he was hiding behind it. My heart raced. I knew running might make things worse, but I also feared he might try to steal my car or attack me. Cautiously, I slipped my hand into my pocket to check for